is the third video installment of Chapter 3, and we're talking about sensory and perceptual development. Okay, sensation. What is sensation? It occurs when information interacts with sensory receptors. So these receptors are your eyes, ears, tongue, nostrils, and skin. So think about your senses. If you see things, hear things, you taste things, you feel touch, you smell things, and so on. Does that make sense? So interpretation of what is sensed is the perception. So, for example, I might perceive that there is a spider on my arm because I feel this sensation. But what really it might be is like a hair or something like that. It just tickled my arm. But for me, so anxious about spiders, things like that, it may frighten me immediately, and I think it's a spider. So these are two different things. I might sense one thing, but I might perceive another. I would figure it out that that's not what that is, but that doesn't change that there's a difference between those two. So the ecological view, it directly says the directly perceives information that exists in the world around us. When studying the infant's perception, there's a visual preference method, so studying whether infants can distinguish one stimulus from another, and by measuring the length of time they attend to different stimuli. So I want you to watch this video of a baby looking at a stimulus. If I can get it to play.
The following video clip is a selection from the DVD What Babies Can Do, an activity-based guide to infant development. This chapter shows the first of 8 activities. In this clip, you will see how to test and track the development of a newborn baby's ability to follow things with his or her eyes. As with all of the activities in the What Babies Can Do DVD, step-by-step instructions are shown, along with videos of what to expect from children at different ages. Please note that the video and audio quality are much higher on the DVD itself than in this online video clip. For more information, contact us at vishton@powerbabies.com or visit our website, www.powerbabies.com. In this activity, you can see how babies develop the ability to follow things with their eyes. All you need is a comfortable infant seat and a colorful toy that you can gently shake and move from side to side. Before we consider how babies move their eyes, let's discuss 2 different ways that adults move theirs. We make saccadic eye movements as we scan the environment around us. The eyes make abrupt jumps, called saccades, that last a few milliseconds apiece. In between the jumps, our eyes remain relatively still. We make smooth tracking movements when we follow a target with our eyes. Notice that the eyes move smoothly from place to place without making abrupt jumps. We can only do this when there is a directly visible target moving in front of us. Infants are born with the ability to make the jumpy saccadic eye movements. Smooth tracking, however, only seems to show up around 7 weeks of age. By watching your child carefully, you can see this ability emerge. It's important to note that young babies are usually only awake, calm, and alert for a few hours per day. For all of the activities presented in this video, we have selected clips in which the infant actually performed the task, except for this one. Don't get frustrated if your child doesn't accomplish some of these tasks the first time you try. It may be that your baby is just drowsy or hungry. The best strategy is to wait and try again later. At 1 week of age, this little girl is able to follow a toy as it moves to her left, center, and right. As she does so, you can see her saccadic eye movements. In this clip, taken a few days later, the saccadic jumps are very clear, especially when we slow down the video. Notice how she looks at the toy but doesn't immediately follow it when it moves to her left. When she does, her eyes make discrete jumps. Here, here, and again here. A week later, we can still see the saccadic eye movements, but the jumps are smaller and faster. Research has shown that the movements are also more accurate and more able to anticipate the motion of an object rather than just reacting to it. As your baby's neck muscles get stronger, you will notice that the object can be followed across a greater range of motion. As the arms get stronger, you may notice the beginnings of reaching movements. More on that in Activity 4. Your baby will also get better at seeing the object from further away, even as far away as the feet. A close-up of this 5-week-old shows the eye movements well. They are rapid and accurate, but still no smooth tracking. The brain systems responsible for this are not yet fully functional. Around 2 months of age, we get our first glimpses of smooth tracking. It's easiest to see if you use a small toy and stop shaking it once you have the child's attention. Notice how the eyes move to follow without lagging behind the target. Notice also that the abrupt jumps in eye position are almost completely absent. Even at this age, however, most eye movements are still saccadic in nature. Beyond 3 months of age, a more adult-like pattern of tracking begins to emerge. The infant makes many saccadic eye movements, but with smooth tracking mixed in as well. Smooth tracking improves gradually, until as late as 2 years of age, but most of the development is finished by 8 months. This activity will become frustrating for most children, as they get more and more interested in grabbing and chewing on targets, rather than just watching them. As long as you eventually let the child have the toy, however, my experience suggests that all will be forgiven.
It was pretty interesting. So you can see the the gradual changes in the way infants are seeing things. Basically, the rapid or the saccadic eye movements, and then the rapid or the changes where it becomes more rapid, and then gradually where the infant can follow the target more smoothly. So, and you can read more about this in your text, but this is about Fance's experiment on infants' visual perception. If you remember this, the infants stare at like a human face much more or longer than they stare at different other stimuli. So if you take evolutionary psychology, there's also theories about why that would be due to has something to do with survival. It's a survival instinct to do that. Now, habituation is given to the decrease, a name given to the decrease in responsiveness to a stimulus after repeated presentations of the stimulus. Habituation is a recovery of a habituated response after a change in stimulation. Eye tracking technology that can facilitate the use of most methods for investigating the infant's perceptual abilities. Visual acuity. The newborn's vision is estimated at 2600, which is really bad. I think that's even worse than my vision, but I really can't remember what my vision is without glasses. But by 6 months, their vision changes to 2040. So there's a rapid change in, if you think about it, for 6 months, the vision from 2600 to 2040. So you can tell that it's gradual, but it's kind of rapid. The faces are among the most important visual stimuli, as you saw before, and color vision improves. And perceiving occluded objects and depth perception are among some of the things that were studied, which we'll talk about. So this is visual acuity during the first months of life. So as you can see, at first the infant, this is like somebody with horrible vision, right? So, and then it gradually changes, and they're able to perceive the human face much more clearly. And infants' predictive tracking of a briefly occluded moving ball. So this is a figure from your book that demonstrates different ways here. So there's gradual occlusion. So look here, here, and then here. Then abrupt, look here, and then here, and then implosion. So there's this is you see there's a change in size here. Then I have, this is some eye tracking software that was put on an infant. You can see by the little blue markers where this infant is looking. So this is really interesting. It's with Toby. I will be honest, the sound is very annoying, but I think it still was a good video. So this is where Toby is looking, where the blue. And they would have different stimuli between these presentations of this ball. So Toby's like, where did the ball go? But they center this. You can see when there's no ball, it's like, where did it go? It'll be over here. And then it centers on the stimulus that comes up. So he has no idea, and he looks back over when he sees the ball again. And these were very long. I don't want to have to watch the entire one. If you want to watch the full 2 minutes, because it does the same thing throughout, but you're welcome to watch the rest of it. But I thought that was interesting to watch eye tracking software and how it works, and how they do studies like that. Now, the visual cliff is one of the more, this is one that you should know when we're done here. You may already know this because you may have talked about it in Psych 100, examining infants' depth perception on the visual cliff. Here is a video of some babies on the visual cliff. It's really interesting.
Everyone has had some kind of an experience feeling something kind of like fear of heights, and it makes perfect common sense that we shouldn't jump over the edge of a drop-off because it's dangerous, and if it's dangerous, then we should probably be afraid of it.
Probably.
Exactly how and when this hypothetical fear develops makes for pretty gleeful research inside Dr. Karen Adolph's lab.
We're discovering some surprising things that are flying in the face of, how people have studied locomotion for the last 100 years.
Including what babies do and feel when they're on a ledge.
So the story about fear of heights is that there was a very, very famous classical study in developmental psychology by Gibson and Locke in 1960 that showed that human infants and infants of a number of different species will avoid crossing over an apparent drop-off on what they called a visual cliff.
As soon as the baby can move about, he can be observed in the same way as other animals.
It's a glass table, and on one side there's a checkerboard pattern surface right under the glass. The other side of the table, the patterned surface is way down on the floor. So visually, it looks like a big 3-foot drop-off. So when human babies first begin crawling, most of them will crawl over the apparent drop-off, but after several weeks of crawling experience, then they'll begin to refuse to crawl over the drop-off. And the conventional interpretation of this was that infants are avoiding the drop-off because they're afraid of heights.
Backing away very quickly.
No, she's not interested.
She wants no part of that side. The experiment became the shaky foundation for the myth that crawling innately teaches us to fear heights.
Babies avoid going over the drop-off because they're afraid of heights. How do we know they're afraid of heights? Because they avoid crawling over the drop-off. So as you may have noticed, the argument is circular.
As it happened, the visual cliff was a better test of an infant's depth perception, not their fear of heights. And if you look closely, you may have actually noticed that the babies don't look particularly scared.
It is a perfectly safe surface of support. So after one trial, human infants cleverly figure this out, and then they will crawl over the drop-off.
So how do you really test if a baby is scared of heights?
You can test babies at the edge of a real cliff where there's no safety glass. It's just an actual drop-off, and the drop-off can be adjustable, so it can be little or really, really big.
And why stop there? Inside Dr. Adolph's Infant Action Lab, babies are tested on a variety of apparatuses.
You can test babies at the edge of a slope, so it can be steeper, 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 crossing bridges that are wide or narrow over a surface of support, and so on. If there's no safety glass, you can test the same baby dozens and dozens of trials in the same session. And that means that you can determine for each individual infant when they think that that surface is safe and when they think it's risky within a couple of degrees of accuracy, like 2 degrees of accuracy for a slope.
Dr. Adolph has spent 25 years running tests like these, and the resulting data sets are both convincing and adorable.
Infants spend most of each trial right at the edge of the precipice. They're reaching their arm down over the drop-off. They are putting their little feet or their little hands on the bridge and taking little tiny steps at the edge. And all the while they're doing it with either neutral or positive facial expressions.
What's more surprising is how their approach changes as they learn different forms of locomotion.
So what happens is that when babies first begin crawling, they'll crawl right over the edge. Then over weeks of crawling, their responses get more and more accurate until finally they're at adult-like levels so that they can tell precisely whether a slope is safe for crawling or whether a drop-off is safe for crawling. But then the next week, when these babies stand up and face these same drop-offs, same slopes, same apparatus, now as a new walker, they walk right over the edge. So in fact, there seems to be 4 learning curves in development as babies learn to sit, learn to crawl, as they learn to cruise, and then finally as they learn to walk. So if they were afraid of heights, you should just be afraid of heights. In the rain and on a train and in a tree, you shouldn't see 4 separate learning curves.
So if babies aren't learning to be afraid of heights, what are they learning?
I think that what babies are learning over weeks of sitting, crawling, cruising, walking is they're learning to perceive the relations between their bodies and the environment.
They're discovering what's possible and what's just a little too far.
And you can learn that without feeling any sort of fear at all. In fact, Eleanor Gibson, the person who first invented the visual cliff, wrote later in her life, as a goat is peering over the edge of a steep crag, it knows not to walk off the edge. And she said, I don't think it's feeling any emotions at all. It just knows not to go. And that's what we're seeing in babies.
Who probably know not to go. Probably. For Science Friday, I'm Luke Groskin.
So I thought that particular video was more interesting because it expanded on the original study of the visual cliff, how there were different learning curves, because even though these infants had learned, I can't crawl off this because it drops, when they didn't have the glass surface up, when they started walking, they still walked off the edge of the cliff thinking that they would be okay. So I thought that was interesting to show you guys. So for sensory and perceptual development, there are different changes for hearing changes, and think of loudness, pitch, localization. These are things that have to be like localization, where the sound is coming from, where the infant figures that out. Pain perception, smell, differentiation of odors and preferences, taste, sensitivity to taste, and taste preferences. Intramodal perception involves integrating information from two or more senses and modalities, like vision and hearing. So you hear a sound, you know where it comes from, right? So I hear this, like imagine this infant hearing this dog barking but not realizing that dogs bark yet, and then figuring out, hey, that sound is coming from that that thing, right? So whether they know it's a dog at that time or not, it doesn't matter. It's just this sound is coming from here. Most perception is intramodal and becomes sharper in their first year of life. So think about infants. They learn so much in their first 5 years of your life. You learn so much. Think about these babies are learning something every day. Okay, whether it's an infant whose parents go out and buy all these stimulating activities for their infant and are able to take their infant to play dates and museums and meet with other kids and are in really expensive preschools, or whether it's a family who just sits their infant in front of a television, or if this infant is suffering from abuse, these babies are absorbing everything that they're learning at these stages, and this will determine how they meet these different stages or different phases of their growth and development over time. Nature, nurture, and perceptual development. So nativists emphasize nature, empiricists emphasize learning and experience. Perceptual motor coupling. So perception and action are not isolated, but rather they are coupled. So what they perceive and what they do. Individuals perceive in order to move, and move in order to perceive. Does that make sense? I hope so. If anything here, or you have questions, comments, or concerns of any of this, please let me know. The next section we're going to talk about for chapter 3, and I believe it's the last section, is cognitive development. There might be another section after, but I believe it's just this last one.